Okay, we're continuing Halacha Aleph, all about the sheikh. You're not supposed to eat with the guy. So I'm going to start by mentioning something that's actually not brought in Shulchan Aruch. It's a continuation of something here, and then we'll see how that connects to what we're talking about. The Mechaber talked about towards the end of the din about a guy, a yid who's visited by a guy. Which we didn't talk too much about that. And there's an added part onto that in the Taisus. Taisus in the Gemara and Rambam Alpha and Pes. That Taisus talks about an unusual situation. It's not so important to us what that is. Of a person who's by the guy, and it's a whole situation where the kula that you see in Shulchan Aruch doesn't apply. It's not considered Pesai. And there Taisus says that the yid is allowed to drink. Well, the guy gave him the food because Mishum Aivah. Okay? So if you look at Taisus by itself, you'd say if there's just a general kula, this is an Issa Rabbanan. So Mishum Aivah, Hiti was certainly Yisurim Rabbanan. That's how you would understand by itself. I'm mentioning it now because as we go on, we'll find out that a better pshat is what Taisus really means. Okay? But the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it, the Shach brings it, Beverages brings it, everybody agrees. I said, agrees to it. It's a Taisus right here in the Sugya. It's not put in Shulchan Aruch. But we'll see it's not singly not in Shulchan Aruch, but the Shach and others bring it in, it's fine. Okay, so let's move on. Let's go on. We'll get the mitzvah and we'll come back to this. Okay. The reason why you're not allowed to drink shecher, in the base of Kechavim, is because of Kashrus. Okay, because then over here, they say here in Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah, second one.
Second one. Okay, it's Asum Mishum Chasnas. Okay, so what you would think is that if a person, the way that it leads to Chasnas is, if I'm going to drink the Reis of Kechavim, then that interaction itself will lead to Chasnas. Okay, now the question of that is, if it was direct, that drinking Shecher, the Reis of Kechavim, would lead to Chasnas, then you would think that the solution. What would be the din? The din is you can't eat it in his house. You have to eat it in your house, or you have to eat it out of his house. You would think that the solution would be is just don't drink it with him. Okay? The solution wouldn't be that you have to be out of his house. The solution would be is don't drink with the guy. Like for example, in the stories in the Gemara, the person seemingly was drinking by himself. Okay, so you think that should be mutter. If the problem is by you're interacting with him when you're drinking, then that would lead to chasnus. Then the what Chazal should have said is, what should you do to fix that problem? You should, instead of saying go home, they should say just don't eat with him, drink it by yourself. Okay, so a number of Rishonim give a hezber in the Isser in a way that's all exactly the same. Okay, they give the exact, to me, seem exactly the same Isser, which is like this. Okay, let's look at how Rashi says it. Okay, which is to say, look and the Rambam, the Rajah that I have here quoted on the screen, the point is that it's not that if I drink in his house, that will lead to chasnas, but there's an extra step. If I drink by him, then I might drink with him. And if I drink with him, that might lead to chasnas. Okay, it's a two-part. The Rambam says, She'ikra Gzeira Shem Yisr Etzlai. Okay, the Gzeira is because of chasnas, but there's an in-between step. By drinking in his house, that might get me to a second step, which is Shem Yisr Etzlai. I'll eat with him, and then that's the interaction that leads to chasnas. So the Rajba, that's not as strong maybe, but the point is, the Gemara says don't drink the sheikh in their house, even by yourself. But if you drink it in their house, you might lead to drinking with them, or eat it with them, and then that might lead to chasnas. Okay, so
but that's not right.
It's very similar. Okay, my point here is that I'm not pointing at exactly the same thing, the point that there's an in-between step. It's not that if you drink in their house, that leads to chasnas. If you drink in their house, that leads you to do something else, eating or drinking with them, and that leads to chasnas. There's like an in-between step. There's a stop along the way. You won't go straight from this to this. You'll stop along the way. Okay?
Is there halachic significance to this?
I'm about to tell you what the last means. Yes, I'm about to tell you that. Okay? Before I tell you that...
Because I'll say it, the Yitzhak doesn't come in one shot,
Right.
Like how we do with Yitzhak.
I'm not arguing that. I'm making the point. Okay, now, it can sein, if you think about it, before I tell you that, what I was about to say to you is, that's why it could be that that's a makar to I told you beforehand that the Rosh says, it's put in Shulchan Aruch, that the Rosh says that if you eat b'derech aroy, that it's mutter. Okay, if you're not kvei atzim lishleis, then it's mutter to do it. And we talked about it. We said, well, where did he get that from? It's not. He made up a kula that doesn't say the Gemara, and it could be that that understanding like this helps is possibly where the rush comes from. That the whole concern is the drinking itself is not what's going to lead to chasnas. The drinking itself will lead you to drink or eat more with them, and that will lead to the chasnas. Then, if you're drinking in a way that can't ever lead to that, maybe that's where the rush came from. Again, we've mentioned in the past that there's the rush doesn't have a makar in the Gemara. The Gemara says you're not allowed to do it, and the rush says, but sometimes you're allowed to do it. Okay, he sort of made it up. He doesn't bring any makar to it, so maybe that's his understanding also that there's like an extra step in here is where it comes from. Now. So why is it important? Why do I care? Aside just for the Havana of it, of that there's an in-between step. So, Rav Moshe says, I have a practical nafkamina to this day. Okay? I may have added in some words here, but Rav Moshe says, I have a nafkamina to this day, to the fact that there's this extra step in between. He says like this. He says like this. We know, we saw in the din, the Shulchan Aruch says you can't drink shecher. The Gemara says you can't drink shecher at a guy's house. And most Rishonim held that you can't drink any alcoholic beverage. Okay, and Shulchan Aruch tells you all kinds of alcoholic beverages you're not allowed to drink. Okay, the Rambam said, no, it only applies to shecher. Tomorrow, like some Rishonim, it's only for shecher. There's a very limited isser to very specific things, which is for us, it's like doesn't mean anything to us. We don't drink shecher tomorrow, so essentially we ignore the whole din. For us, it doesn't mean anything to this whole din. Okay, but Rav Moshe says that kula that only applies to shecher tomorrow. That's on the Isser, the secondary Isser, which is don't drink shecher. He says, but it was partial to the Gemara, that was understood that of course the primary Isser, to sit down and have the Suda with them, to sit down and drink with them, that was partial to the Isser, has nothing to do with whether it's shecher tomorrow or a different kind of shecher. It has nothing to do with anything. He says, if you drink the shecher tomorrow, you might come to drinking, having a whole party with them. You have the party, that'll lead to chasnas. The party was partial to the Gemara that was Isser. When did he tell you that part was Isser? It was so obvious that was the Isser part. And there's no kula of shecher tomorrow. If you're sitting at the bar together with the guy, that's partial that that's Isser.
That's also a specific zero. That's partial that it's also.
I don't even know. I don't even know if it's an official zero. Remember we saw that we don't even know where the Taisa said. I don't even know where this zero came from. The Lord just says it. How do we know such a takana? Okay, but it's somehow like partial that was included. That's the basis for this whole Gemara is an assumption that you can't eat with them, you can't have this whole party with them because that'll lead to chasnas, to which the Gemara says, and shecher is like an extension of that. So on the extension, we say that extension only applies to shecher tomorrow. But the Iggeros itself, of course the Iggeros applies to all kinds of beverages. Okay,
so an Iggeros, so what would define exactly when the applies to all beverages? If it's a what? You need a mezumin, you need 3 people, you need a invitation. I'm like, what's the what?
That's part of the law. How many people?
So it's a good question. It's a good question. Rav Moshe doesn't explain. Okay, Rav Moshe doesn't explain what case he's talking about. What kind of is? Nor is it clear if he's specific only to beverages, to drinking with the guy. It seems like that. The Rav Moshe looked at mishtois. Okay, having a mishter. It's not 100%. I mean, you know that the Rambam says, I have it on the screen. The same thing is put in Shulchan Aruch is that Iggeros Moshe is shema yisrael. That's like yisrael doesn't sound like drinking. It sounds like eating with him. You know, so it's not clear to me whether Rav Moshe thinks eating or drinking, and more is what's the case that Rav Moshe is talking about. Okay, what's the shayla that he was answering when he said this thing? The shayla was like this. Some people wanted to make a parlor meeting to raise money for tzedakah. And they, for whatever reason, they wanted to make the parlor meeting at the house of someone who was not Jewish. Okay? That was the plan, was to make the parlor meeting at the house of this person who was not Jewish. Maybe he was down to me. It wasn't clear to me why the parlor meeting was supposed to be at that person's house. And they wanted to make it at the house. And of course, the food was all going to be kosher. It was the Yidden who were going to make the parlor meeting, but they were going to do it at the guy's house. So Rav Moshe says, you can't do it at this person's house because even though you're not going to shecher tomorrow, he says, but the whole idea of having a party in the Beis Shel Akum, of course you're not allowed to have that. Now, if the only issue was to do it get away with these alcoholic beverages, so don't serve beer. I mean, what was maybe, unless that was like, so you couldn't not do that. I don't know. Well, I don't go to parlor meetings so often, but do you have to serve alcoholic beverages at a parlor meeting? Anybody do? No. So why couldn't they just have the parlor meeting without alcoholic beverages? So it makes it sound like the problem is like the Rambam says, like Shema Yisrael. That's like that the whole even without alcoholic beverages is an isser. It's not clear whether the isser when Moshe is this base isser. That means even if you want to have even if you're not going to have alcoholic beverages, you want just to sit down and eat with the guy. Now, Moshe does.
It's a bunch of Jews. It's going to be full of Jews.
Right? It's going to be, of course it's going to be. It's going to probably it's going to be lots and lots of Yidden there. And Ramesh still says you can do it by Beis Shalach. Okay? So Ramesh, it's not clear. And again, it sounds like even if it's not with drinking. Now, Ramesh says like this. Ramesh says, that's true if you make the party in his house. He says, but what happens if the guy makes a party, okay, and he invites you to come to his party? Okay, he tells you to come to his party, okay, or for our purposes, okay, the office has a party, okay, the person works in a non-Jewish company, and they have a party, okay, an end-of-the-year party, or some kind of a party going on in the office, and they invite this Yid to the party. So, Ramesh says, so is that the same thing? Ramesh says, no, he can go to the party. And listen to how Ramesh says it. He says this, what the person should do is he should go to the party, not spend a lot of time at the party. And the reason why he's now connected to the din I told you before, the reason why he's going to the party is Mishum Aivah. He's going to the party because it's like Mama's like antisocial to not come to the party. And in the office, they look at you like there's something wrong with you if you don't come to the end of the year party. It just doesn't fit in. So you're going to Mishum Aivah. You just want to get along with people. They shouldn't think of you that you're such an odd person. So you're going to Mishum Aivah, and you go there in a derech haroy, just in there for as so to speak, temporarily. Ramesh says when a person goes Mishum Aivah, that's a variation of the din that b'derech haroy is mutter. Okay, what I'm pointing out to you is what Tosfos said. Tosfos says two things. He says there's a heter of haroy and there's a heter of Aivah. It's not the classic heter of Aivah that Yisurim D'Rabbanan are sometimes pushed aside Mishum Aivah. It's not because of that. When it's Mishum Aivah, that by its nature makes it derech haroy. Remember, the whole issur is to eat it b'derech keva. If I'm only in a place because you forced me to come here, because I have no choice, because I can't keep my job if I don't show up at the meeting, and so then I'm forced to doing that thing. That in itself is not kaveh atzon l'shus. I'm not coming here to party with you. I'm coming here because I have to come here. Okay, so which means is when you hear, you may have heard this. People ask a Rav what they should do. The office is having a party at the end of December, and having a party. They want to know if they can go there, or they want to understand if they can go there, or they find that they don't give out their bonuses at that party. You have to go to the party, whatever, etc., like that. So a Rav, many Rabbanim will tell people, you really should try to avoid it. But if you have to go for a couple of minutes, shake a few people's hands, and then you should leave. Okay? They're not, what's going on here, we're finding out is that they're not saying to the person, Nebuch, it's for your job, so for your job, to keep your job, you're allowed to just do it anyhow and just make it as simple as possible. That's not what they're saying. They're saying, according to what Ramesh is explaining, is that when it says you can do Mishum Aivah, and by its nature, if you do something Mishum Aivah because I have no choice, and you do it b'derech haroy, I come for a couple of minutes and I stay as long as I have to, and then I walk out the door, that's mutter. That's what Shulchan said you're allowed to do if it's b'derech haroy. Okay, even the issur that we have in Shulchan is allowed to be done. So when we say on a Rav would say to a person, go to the party if you have to, and then stay for a couple of minutes, that's not so to speak, it's not a b'diavad, that's actually what he's supposed to do. You do it b'derech haroy, and then he's allowed to do it. But
you shouldn't drink?
He doesn't say that, but you would think that should be part of it. Okay, and that's part of what I'm stuck with. Is the issue the drinking or the issue is the partying? Okay, if the issue is the drinking, then just don't drink. But it's not, that part is not clear. Okay, but that so far that's not going to be mutter. That heter is not going to work if there's a business meeting. Why don't they say to you, we're not just having a party, and you could just drop in for a couple of minutes and be b'derech haroy and come Mishum Aivah. They say, no, we're having a meeting. Okay, we're 5 of us are going to a restaurant, and we're going to sit down in Chalice is fine. In Chalice, take it a second. Take it easy a second. Ramesh says the issue is in the guy's house. That's only an issur. Ramesh says you want to make the party by the Yidden, that's fine, no problem. You want to make it in the guy's house, which is what the Dim is talking about over here. He says, so if you go to Shalit, you're safe. What happens when you go to the treif restaurant? You may remember when we learned Tfilas Kalim, we talked about this what we thought is, or I think is a horrible practice, that a person can go to a treif restaurant, okay, and they serve him food on dishes, on china dishes, a full served meal, not wrapped up airline meal. They have this whole trick how they do it. They get the place's dishes and they never use them. We talked there about the Tfilas Kalim angle of whether those dishes need to be titled. But now we finally got another issue. Okay, there's another problem. We talked in passing about the Marasayin, the horrible way it looks of 3 guys sitting and eating pork chops and this Yid eating steak, and to the whole world it looks like he's eating treif when really it's a kosher meat from someplace else. But anyhow, but now we're seeing is that there's a different problem, which is you can't say that it's Derech HaRoi and Mishum Aivah when they sit down for a meeting from 12 to 1 one day. They're sitting down having lunch together. L'chayra, if a Moshe means even when you don't drink, then l'chayra there would be a problem with that. Okay? I don't know what the answer for that is. Okay. Now, we move to a second part. The second part, to all of us, is going to sound very interconnected. Okay? In the Chavdas B'Yom, he says, to me, it sure seems like these things should be connected to each other, although Rav Moshe does not mention this. Okay? And that is like this. Rambam says like this. Rambam says, before he brings our din about shecher, before he says our din that says you're not allowed to drink shecher, which is a Gemara, he says, yesh ta'adam b'mesiba shalakim. Okay? You're not allowed to drink at a party with goyim, even if the next line says, even if the food is kosher, but he says, okay, if most of the people at the party are Yidden, then you're allowed to drink it. Okay? And this is like an introduction to the din that it says in our Gemara, of not to drink it in their houses and blah, blah, whatever it says. Okay? So Ram says, you're not allowed to drink in B'siba Shal Adam. Okay? When the tour our sim is Kuf Yudal. Sim Kuf Yudal is Pas Yisrael, and Sim Kuf Gimel is Bishul Yisrael. Before the tour starts Sim Kuf Yudal, he gives like an introduction. Okay? He gives an introduction. And the introduction says, Yesh Svarim Shasu Chachamim. There are things that are Asur, Chacham Asur, even those Elohim Ikum in Torah, and they are, for example, he says, Pas, that even if the guy baked it, it's Asur. Bishul Akum, if a guy cooked it, it's Asur. And the third one is, you're not allowed to drink Lo Yesh Ta'adam than Mesiba Shal Akum. Okay? You're not allowed to drink the Mesiba Shal Akum. And that's like his introduction. And then he goes on to the din. And obviously what's going on here is, that introduction is, you can't eat pas hakum, that's sim kufi beis. You can't eat bishul hakum, that's sim kufi gimel. You can't eat b'mesiba shal goyim, that's going to be sim kufi daled. Okay, that's like an introduction to these three simon that are coming that are all asa b'shem chasas. Okay, well, when the Torah says that, the Beis Yosef says, I have no idea where that din comes from. Okay, this Rambam, he says, that Torah is quoting the Rambam, he says, I have no idea. The Efshishu price of Tosefta. He says, I have no idea where Ram got that din from. Okay, there's no Gemara that says, Lo Yish Ta'adam B'Mesiba Shalakim. Okay, it doesn't exist. There's no such thing. He says, maybe it's a Tosefta. In other words, maybe I don't know. Maybe if I, the Beis Yosef, didn't know this din, where it came from. So, that's what it says in the Beis Yosef. Okay, now, the question is, if you open up the Rambam, and you see this in Lo Yish Ta'adam B'Mesiba Shalakim, the Maggid Mishnah doesn't say any Makar for this part of the din, but the Kesef Mishnah does. Kesef Mishnah says that the Makar for this din is Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Ches. Okay?
Same person.
I'm well aware of that. He says it's a Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Ches. It says we're in Daf Amnal. Okay, here's the Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Ches. Everybody says Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Ches. What are you talking about? Now the Gemara Avodah Zarah Daf Ches says a special din about going to a wedding that a guy makes where he's going to be moeded to Avodah Zarah. A whole special din is brought in Sim Kuf Nun Beis in your day. It's brought here in Shulchan Aruch in Kuf Nun Beis. They said that's a very specific case, a very, very specific case when you're not allowed to drink with a guy, a very specific case you're not allowed to drink with him. He says, but that's not a regard to this, like Yesh to Adam and the B'Siba Shal Akum. He says, what's going on? Okay, so it turns out like this. Okay, the following is pieced together from a few different parts. I was first alerted to what I'm about to tell you. It's on the side of the Franco Rambam. Okay, and like this. Okay.
Well, first he wrote Beis Yosef.
Yes. Okay. I'm about to show you three different prints of the Rambam. Okay. The first print of the Rambam that had the Kesef Mishnah was printed in Venice in Shin Lamed Aleph, okay, about a year before the Beis Yosef died. Okay. When he wrote the Kesef Mishnah, it seems late in his life. He died a year or two later, and so the first print was from Venice, and afterwards, what it seems is an important print of the Rambam about 100 years later, 125 years in Amsterdam, and then a list one I cannot pronounce it, Firth or something like that. That's a place in Poland. Okay, it's not in Brooklyn. It's in Poland. Okay,
It's in Washington Heights.
Okay, here's a cover pages from those three Rambams. Okay, so these three prints of the Rambam. Okay. And I'm going to show you now the Kesef Mishnah in those three prints. Okay? Now look what it says. Okay? In the Venice edition, the first one, it says, Umasha Kasl Yishtab Mesiba Shal Akav V'chul. That's it. Doesn't say anything. There's no makar. Okay? The Chasam Sofer says that when the Kesef Mishnah and the Maggid Mishnah say, when the Kesef Mishnah and the Magid Mishnah bring the Rambam and they don't say Makar, they just say like V'chulu, they just bring a V'chulu, that means is they didn't know what the Makar was. That's why they wrote V'chulu, because they didn't know what the Makar was. And they were hoping maybe one day they'll fill it in, but for now they didn't know. Okay, well, came along the Amsterdam edition. And in the Amsterdam edition, like 100 years later, they added in all kinds of Maramakanis that hadn't been filled in. Okay? But they were, in a lot of places they added in, but they were very honest. They were very honest that they put it in brackets. Okay, it says they put it in brackets, okay, that they put it in brackets because they knew it was not the Kesef Mishnah, they were just adding it in because it seems they added in a lot of Marmakanas. Okay? So it's printed on the side of the page. It's printed on the side of the page. They avoid their paragration and they put that fast. Okay? The printer was being honest because the Kesef Mishnah didn't have print. Dafim. They already knew Dafim, so they pretended and they put it on the side. Okay. But then, by the later printing, and it seems that everybody printed after it based on the Amsterdam edition. It actually looks very beautiful. The printing is very nice. And then, but came the later prints, and guess what? They said, brackets? Who needs these brackets for? What was the point of these brackets for? Everything's one stone. The last one, they wrote, Mashkal Ishim, Mesiva Shalakam, but what is their preparation? They just stuck in and said, who needs this bracket thing? We can fix this up first. It's hard to read this thing. So it turns out that the Kesef Mishnah never said it. Okay? The Kesef Mishnah did not say that it's a Gemara Daf Ches because, like, everybody banged their head against it. Well, the Aruch Shulchan has a pshat. He has something about a pshat, how it's a raya from Daf Ches. But everybody banged their heads against it. Well, what kind of raya is there from Daf Ches? But in fact, the Kesef Mishnah didn't say it. And like I told you, the Beverages said, he says, After Shul Tesef Doi Brisa. And I don't have any idea where this thing comes from. Okay? No one knows where this din wrong comes from. So
really, the guilty party is the Amsterdam edition. What is our purpose?
No, because they put it in brackets. And the point was to tell you is, this is not the Kesef Mishnah. We stuck this in. This is like an addition.
So the Kashrus, so what the Shigel Torah is to explain whoever the...
So Mr. Tyron for whatever his name is, why did he take the brackets? I don't know. Anyways. But the Kesef Mishnah didn't say it. I told you, I showed you the Beverages said I had no idea where this thing comes from. Okay? It's in Poland. It's in Solon, Poland. Okay, I looked it up on a map. It's not called that anymore. Okay, it has a new name to the city now. Okay, the way you pronounce it, it sounds like dying first. Like that's how you. But that's really not how you pronounce it. Anyway, whatever. Okay, so it's possible we could say now knowing that we don't have the makar, that what Rav Moshe says is really the makar for this din. Okay. Remember, what Moshe said was, he said, when the Gemara said you can't drink shecher with a goy because it leads to Kashrus, the Rishonim pointed out that it's not a direct connection. It's not if you drink shecher, you're going to lead to Kashrus. Because like I said, how does shecher, drinking by yourself, a lonely guy drinking in a bar, lead to Kashrus? So we showed you from the Rishonim was that there's a step in between. If you drink by yourself, if you drink in their Beis Akum, you might come to drink with them in the Beis Akum. If you drink with them, that will lead to Kashrus. There's an extra step in the middle. So Rav Moshe said that was Rav Moshe. So I think therefore there's an isser to drink, to be with goyim, to eat with goyim. That's like an understood isser. And it could be the Rambam saying the same thing. That the isser when the Rambam didn't say it's a problem eating with them, he says you can't drink with goyim. He doesn't limit it to only being in their places, as we saw in the Rambam. If you want to go back to, we'll go back to the Rambam. Okay, go back. The Rambam said. It's not limited to eating by them. It's not the Isra is not eating at their in the Beis Akum the way Rav Moshe learned. Moshe, it's only it's similar to where the Gemara says. Rambam says no, it's not depending on eating with them. It's the question here is how many of them there are and how many of you there are. Okay, now that let's part of him. How you right on the CV you saw mutter that can be changed has a makart. Okay, that's a raya from the Gemara right here in our sugya. There's a raya that if there are more Yid and then goyim, then it's mutter. Or if it's equal, then it might be mutter. Okay, that the Beis Yosef has a right there. He said, I know where that came from. Okay, so the Rambam, we could understand the Rambam to be like Rav Moshe, in the general idea like Rav Moshe said, which was that there's a pre-existing isser, the Gemara, an understood isser, an applied isser before the Gemara says, don't drink shecher in a Beis Avikachavim, and that is because there's an obvious that you're not allowed to do something else. Rav Moshe, but the obvious thing you're not allowed to do is to drink in the Beis Akum with the goy. That's the obvious. And the Rambam would be saying, no, what's obvious is you're not allowed to drink with goy, not the Beis Akum. You're not allowed to drink with goy. If you drink in a Beis Akum, you might need to drink with goy in general. Okay, so according to the Rambam, the Isra is not connected to the Beis Akum. It's not connected to the Beis Akum like Rav Moshe thinks it is. Like the Gemara talks about the Shecher Isra. He says it has to do with drinking with goyim. Meaning, which is to say is, if the people want to go to a meeting and they want to have that meeting in shallots, Also, now we're in a base of Shul Yisrael, we're in a Jewish house. Then Rav Moshe said, no problem. The Isser, the big Isser, that Isser applies only like the Gemara's case in the base of Shalachim. But according to the Rambam says, no, the Isser has to do with eating with the Goyim, just if there's more Goyim than there are Yidden. That's what the Isser is. Okay, so according to the Rambam's pre-Isser, the Rambam's like primary Isser that there is, applies even the base of Shul Yisrael. He doesn't connect it to that at all. It has to do with how many there are, Yidden or Goyim, in which case, even if you went to a Jewish place, it would be Isser. Okay? But the Rambam is clear, again, in Rav Moshe we were not sure what it meant, but in the Rambam it's clear that the Isser has to do with drinking. Again, so the Rambam, the way we're understanding it, just like Rav Moshe said, the Isser in the Gemara is that being sheicha with them, and the primary Isser is drinking with them any place else, but it's very much related to drinking. In Rav Moshe we weren't clear if it was only drinking related, but here it's clear, like Yish to other than so then it would be specific to drinking. So that means is, if you want to go to Shalat and not drink, then you're okay. In Rav Moshe, we could think about Rav Moshe, you're safe because it's Shalat. But if you're not drinking, the Rambam was only about drinking. Okay.
It's yayin.
What?
It says yayin.
Right. Okay. Okay. I mean, in the middle line, in the middle part. Yes, right. And he says, well, Yishte. And if it's an expanded version of Shecher, then it's Shecher and drinking anything with it. Right. So it's just drinking. So you wouldn't be able to drink with them. Well, what happens if the boys after work want to go to a bar? Okay, which is unfortunately a very common thing that people do after work. They go have drinks, to unwind after work. So then you can't do that. Okay, even if it would be a Jewish bar, it wouldn't make a difference. Okay, that would still be usher according to the Rambam saying. Okay, according to the Rav Moshe version of that if you were basing Shul Yisrael, it would be okay. In the Rambam version of it, the way he's saying it, it would be usher drink unless it's Rav Yisrael.
If it's yayin.
If it's
No,
it's not. Okay? And he says, even if you avoid the Isra of Yain Neser, even though it's kosher food, that's like the middle line, even though it's kosher food...
Not kosher, but it could be it's modifying the first line. So
that what?
The yayin.
Right, well, the reason why he's mentioning Yain is because that's his idea of treif. What can be treif? Even if the food is kosher.
First one talks about shaker.
Right, so if we understand it comes out of the Gemara...
Maybe it's coming up, maybe not. That's what I'm saying. If you
take
this alone, you wouldn't necessarily be able to...
Okay, maybe. So it comes out, but according to the Rambam, what we said to Rav Moshe, that you may have a problem having this business meeting with people. You see now that at a business meeting, with Rav Moshe, the only way to get to be mutter is if you did it b'derech haroya mishum Aivah, which doesn't work at a business meeting. But according to the Rambam, the person could go to the business meeting if he didn't drink. Okay, if he just says, I'm not drinking, then he'd be safe. According to Rav Moshe, we have to wonder, because Rav Moshe points to the fact that it says that the Ikhad Zer is Shema Yisrael, that's like, doesn't sound like it's necessarily connected to drinking. And again, Rav Moshe's story about a parlor meeting wasn't a drinking event. But according to the way the Rambam sees it, that it's a drinking related Isser, then the person could avoid it by not drinking. Okay, now you should know. The Torah brings this. Okay, but as I said to you, the Torah, when he brings it, he just brings it as the introduction to Siman Kuf Yud Beis, Kuf Yud Gimel, Kuf Yud Aleph. When he comes to Siman Kuf Yud Aleph,
you mean the Rambam?
He brings this part about Yish to Adam B'Sim Shal. This is the whole thing. You should B'Sim Shal. That's what he brings in his introduction. Okay, and you would expect then that when he comes to Siman Kuf Yud Aleph, you would see more about it. Okay, but in fact, it's not there. Okay, he just brings it. Seems that he only brings it as an introduction. The Bishur Sif says, I said to you, says. Beats me where this comes from. Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it. You imagine why the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it. The Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it because he has no idea what the makar for it is. Okay, he says actually who price it the means is I give up. I don't know where this comes from.
Maybe the regular thing that we had the whole time. The Rambam, the Torah understood. This drinking Beis Shalakim, Afka Beis Shalakim, means Mesiba Shalakim.
No, because the next line in Rambam is all the din of Shecher. The Gemara comes right after this. You don't see the bottom of the page, but this is the first thing. Like that, this is an Isser, and Roy Yisrael this thing, and then he goes to another thing, and you can't drink the Shecher even by yourself. It's like a separate din. It's its own. So the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring it. We understand why the Shulchan Aruch doesn't bring this din because he says I don't know where this din comes from. Okay, the Bach seems to be okay with it. He seems to like this din, and the Pri Chodesh brings it also. Okay, but I just told you, almost everybody who does bring it, but most of the poskim are not bringing this thing. Okay, so it's not clear even. It's not even clear whether we actually postulate this. Okay, the Rambam brings this in. And the Torah mentions it in passing. Again, the Torah brings it like as an introductory line. And I mentioned to you a few other people who mentioned it also. It's not clear that everyone else agrees to that thing. Yes, and agrees. Okay.
I think from the context, it's possible to interpret the Rambam as only speaking about yayin in this particular halacha. Because he speaks about shecher afterwards, and then afterwards he talks about other things that are not a shchiach, you can't drink with them. And shecher, you can only not drink with them, ela b'makom l'chiroso,
That's the Gemara, right?
why.
Right.
Not
You think maybe it's only wine?
So see, in other words, other alcoholic beverages would be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so
You know the halacha started by Sheikher. The Rambam and the Gemara starts with Sheikher.
But that's not what the Rambam is
Not in the Rebbe.
okay, so I guess it could be. If the word layesh to adam, layesh to adam.
There's no base.
Right. No, so Rabbi Reese would be thinking the Gemara is there to expect shecher because it presupposes a bigger isser, which Rabbi Reese is saying that only means wine. Layesh to adam means only drinking wine.
Yeah,
Okay.
and after he says this halacha, then he goes on.
No, I didn't say it. So we understand that. But this is the pre-halacha. The Gemara didn't bother to tell you this. The Rambam fills it in for you. And then comes the shecher.
He says specifically,
Right. I understand. We know that part of it. Okay. So maybe. So if that's correct, that it's only wine, then mamish more kal for people. Okay, much more kal for people. But again, it's not, to me, it's not even clear that the din even follows what the Rambam says over here. The Rambam thinks like that's what the din is. I'm not arguing that he thinks that it is. But we don't see it in the later posting being brought down, that's even true. But then there's this, but again, so the person has to, there's these two different variations of almost the same thing. It sounds very similar. What the Rambam says and what Rav Moshe says. Rav Moshe does not quote the Rambam, which is surprising. Maybe he didn't think it's halacha, I don't know what to say. But it all sounds similar, and that's the question.